Often when we talk about personal development, it is thought of as a separate element from the day-to-day business that we're doing. So we may have a performance development, personal development conversation, and it feels like this thing that's off to the side. And in Lead Together, we talk about much more how we can integrate personal development into the day-to-day doing of the business itself. Susan, what are your thoughts and experiences in that regard?
Well, this is such a live topic for me because it's I think when I first started experiencing the tremendous thrill of like understanding that the two things aren't separate, like it was a real aha moment for me. One, well-worn story or reflection that I often share is that, when we're at school, we are there to, learn lessons, learn how to do math, learn about history, learn physics, learn whatever we're learning. But also it's expected that in the playground and in between lessons, we're also learning what it's like to be on a team and learning what it's like to be in relationship to others and learning what it's like to be affected by what others are bringing. And it's always amazed me that like the same thing is happening in the workplace, but we choose to ignore it or not even acknowledge it. So even at the relational level, but at the individual level, it's happening as well. And the idea that we have to somehow separate our own personal growth from the work we do, I think is a little bit silly and potentially a little bit short-sighted. And I think that I don't know if this is going to sound too pejorative, but I do believe that we all know instinctively what bits of ourselves need work, right? Like if I'm being snappy or too quick to judge, I know that that's happening. And so it's going to mostly happen or often happen in the workplace. So if I can recognize that and then understand that, all right, so the opportunity to practice being more mindful, taking a breath before I speak, thinking about what I'm going to say before it comes out of my mouth is something that I can actually practice in the workplace that's going to bring a better outcome operationally to my relationships and my team. All of these things, it's worth paying attention to. And it just has always seemed bizarre to me that it seems never to occur that the workplace is a practical practice space for our personal development, and it really benefits the outcome of the organization. And one of the framings for this are what Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy have coined as deliberately developmental organizations. So organizations that actually accept and acknowledge this and actively create the conditions for this to happen. And I'm curious, Brent, what you think and what you've seen around what that looks like in practice.
I think I love that because, deliberately developmental, taking the chance to move everybody through the cycle, right? What's typical in organizations like you were talking to is that there's some amount of people that are deemed or labeled as the high performers. And those are the ones that we invest resources in creating a development plan and thinking through how they're going to get better. Or if we're not as cutthroat with it, there's an implicit assumption often under the label of like, well, there's only certain people that want to be developed or want to grow or want to expand their capability. But when we actually take a second and look and say, what I've been asking and having that conversation, what would you like to get better in? Or even better, especially for people that are younger in their career and may not know what the next steps might look like, is saying like, here's some things that I could see that you could grow into. And here's this challenging opportunity. So, and I know when I was young in my career, like what people that were more senior to me, what they spent their time and their energy on, what they were paying attention to, and the complexities that they were noticing, that was just over my head. Like I was basically completely blind to them until somebody pointed them out and said, hey, I'm paying attention to how these business connections process out that's completely outside of our business, but will impact us in these ways. And as soon as somebody pointed out to me, I was like, I want to be able to do that. What are the steps? Somebody that's been there and done that could label them out really quickly, and it didn't take a whole ton of time to build in some sort of plan or process that I could use and move myself in that like developmental direction. And so Brent, like I liked that personal approach on like, let me scaffold this together my own. But I'm curious, like on that organizational level, or what things other leaders could do to move an organization to becoming much more deliberately developmental.
Mhm. I think it starts first with the intention to actually build a deliberately developmental organization. So really having the intention. If we don't start from that place, then the likelihood that it will happen on its own is quite a bit smaller. So when we have that intention, then as a leader, starting to really work on our own development and find ways to build our own development into our work and making that visible to others. Very similar to what you had just mentioned there, Travis, around, when we can, as leaders, share that, hey, this is what I'm working on. Can you help me? Just because I'm the leader doesn't mean that I don't still have things to develop. It makes it safe for other people in the organization to do that, that as well. Another thing to think about is just on positioning. So when we are teeing up a new client relationship, a new project, to build into the framing of that at the beginning of, let's see what we can learn as we do this. We're not just here to execute the same thing that we've executed before, but let's see what this has to teach us. And how can we learn and build a stronger organization through the process. And so maybe on that, I'll throw it over to you, Susan, to just talk about what are some of the questions if I, as a leader, want to be working on my own development, or I, as anyone in the organization, what are some questions that I could be asking myself that would help guide me?
I mean, I'm not sure there's so much questions as like small micro practices, like we talk about a lot. Like, for example, in a meeting or after a session or after a work session, just taking time to do a round of reflections. Like, okay, not about the content, but about what did we notice? What did we notice just happened there? And to start to recognize the less obvious elements of the work. Like, for example, one reflection could be, yeah, I noticed that we're getting a lot better at moving slowly when we need to move slowly and moving quickly when we need to move quickly. Another person might reflect, yeah, I really noticed that I heard Travis's voice more there in that particular meeting than I have in the past. And yeah, I think that felt really good and felt really important. And then the next one is this idea of, again, we talk a lot about ritualizing or putting in regular moments or opportunities for us to reflect together. I really like the idea of development triads. So I think lean coffee is one. I like to call it developmental tea. I don't know, I just made that up today. Every week, sit down with your trio for half hour, or as long as it takes to drink a cup of whatever, and just do rounds of reflection on what you're working on. Like, I might say, for me, one of my developmental edges is always, you might laugh at this if you're watching this, is being concise. So I might talk about, what I worked on, what I noticed in my kind of personal developmental goal around being concise and using the appropriate words, and maybe ask what others have noticed in my work that week, or if they have suggestions on what I could try next. But creating the opportunity to actually do this, because obviously, if I can be more concise and clear on my requests or what I'm trying to convey, it's going to be better for the business. And there's so many opportunities in so many different ways, as unique as every individual is, to work on these little aspects that are going to make a big difference.